it murmured.
The Lord save us!"
"The blood was drove out through his nose and ears," continued Slipper, with a voice that indicated the cream of the narration, "and you'd hear his bones cracking on the ground. You'd have pitied the poor boy." "Good heavens!" said Lee Kelway, sitting up very straight in his chair. "Was he hurt, Slipper?" asked Flurry casually. "Hurt, is it?" echoed Slipper in high scorn. "Killed on the spot." He paused to relish the effect of the denouement on Lee Kelway. "Oh, divil so pleasant an afternoon ever you've seen. And indeed, Mr. Flurry, it's what we were all saying. It's a great pity your honour was not there, for the liking you had for Driscoll." As he spoke the last word, there was an outburst of singing and cheering from a carload of people who had just pulled up at the door. Flurry listened, leant back in his chair, and began to laugh. "It scarcely strikes one as a comic incident," said Lee Kelway very coldly to me. "In fact, it seems to me that the police ought—" "Show me Slipper!" bawled a voice in the shop. "Show me that dirty little underlooper till I have his blood. And I'd race one only for him souring the mare on me. What's that you say? I tell you he did. He left 7 slaps on her with the handle of a hay rake." There was in the room in which we were sitting a second door leading to the backyard, a door consecrated to the unobtrusive visits of so-called Sunday travellers. Through it Slipper faded away like a dream, and simultaneously a tall young man with a face like a red-hot potato tied up in a bandage squeezed his way from the shop into the room. "Well, Driscoll," said Flurry, "since it wasn't the teeth of the rake he left on the mare, you needn't be talking." Lee Kelway looked from one to the other with a wilder expression in his eye than I had thought it capable of. I read in it a resolve to abandon Ireland to her fate. At 8 o'clock we were still waiting for the car that we had been assured should be ours directly it returned from the races. At 8:30 we had adopted the only possible course that remained, and had accepted the offers of lifts on the laden cars that were returning to Skibourne; and I presently was gratified by the spectacle of my friend Lee Kelway wedged between a roulette table and its proprietor on one side of the car, with Driscoll and Slipper, mysteriously reconciled and excessively drunk, seated locked in each other's arms on the other. Flurry and I, somewhat similarly placed, followed on 2 other cars. I was scarcely surprised when I was informed that the melancholy white animal in the shafts of the leading car was old Beaucock's much enduring steeplechaser. The night was very dark and stormy, and it is almost superfluous to say that no one carried lamps. The rain poured upon us, and through wet and wind old Beaucock's mare set the pace at a rate that showed she knew from bitter experience what was expected from her by gentlemen who had spent the evening in a public house. Behind her the other 2 tired horses followed closely, incited to emulation by shouting, singing, and a liberal allowance of whip. We were a good 10 miles from Skibourne, and never had the road seemed so long. For mile after mile the half-seen low walls slid past us, with occasional plunges into caverns of darkness under trees. Sometimes from a wayside cabin a dog would dash out to bark at us as we rattled by. Sometimes our cavalcade swung aside to pass, with yells and counter-yells, crawling carts filled with other belated race-goers. I was nearly wet through, even though I received considerable shelter from a Skibourne publican who slept heavily and irrepressibly on my shoulder. Driscoll, on the leading car, had struck up an approximation to "The Wearing of the Green," when a wavering star appeared on the road ahead of us. It grew momently larger. It came towards us apace. Flurry, on the car behind me, shouted suddenly: "That's the mail car, with one of the lamps out. Tell those fellows ahead to look out." But the warning fell on deaf ears.
When laws can stop the blades of grass from growing as they grow,
howled 5 discordant voices, oblivious of the towering proximity of the star. A Bianconi mail car is nearly 3 times the size of an ordinary outside car, and when on a dark night it advances, cyclops-like, with but one eye, it is difficult for even a sober driver to calculate its bulk. Above the sounds of melody there arose the thunder of heavy wheels, the splashing trample of three big horses, then a crash and a turmoil of shouts. Our cars pulled up just in time, and I tore myself from the embrace of my publican to go to Lee Kelway's assistance. The wing of the Bianconi had caught the wing of the smaller car, flinging old Bocock's mare on her side and throwing her freight headlong on top of her, the heap being surmounted by the roulette table. The driver of the mail car unshipped his solitary lamp and turned it upon the disaster. I saw that Flurry had already got hold of Lee Kelway by the heels and was dragging him from under the others. He struggled up, hatless, muddy, and gasping, with Driscoll hanging on by his neck, still singing "The Wearing of the Green." A voice from the mail car said incredulously: "Lee Kelway!" A spectacled face glared down upon him from under the dripping spikes of an umbrella. It was the Right Honourable the Earl of Waterbury, Lee Kelway's chief, returning from his fishing expedition. Meanwhile, Slipper in the ditch did not cease to announce that "Divil so pleasant an afternoon ever ye seen as what was in it." Chapter 5